Welcome everyone to another Raid Shadow Legends video. Today we got patch 5.20 and a brand new heroes released. We have a brand new fusion, Karato Foxhunter. We have a brand new fusion companion, which is a kitsune named Yamiko. And then we have 4 brand new rares. We have 4 brand new epics, but they're kind of done in a weird way. We have 1 epic, which we're going to have to make 4 separate times to fuse Corrado. And we have to use each one of the rares to fuse the epic. And I think we get access to the epic at least one more time as well. So here we go. Let's go over the characters. Let's get started. We got Trugor first. He's a rare magic attack barbarian. Let's see if these guys are any good. So last time we had Ordinator, who I was pretty impressed by. Now, I didn't know if he'd actually be any good when it came to the multipliers, but his kit seemed kind of cool. We'll see if we have any ones that actually stand out this time. We'll see which ones they are. So Blood She Writes is the A1, attacks one enemy, places a 25% increased attack buff on this champion for 2 turns if this attack is critical. Maniacal Chopping attacks one enemy 2 times. Each hit is a 20% chance of placing a stun debuff for 1 turn. And then we have Leave Them Gutted, attacks all enemies, has a 30% chance of increasing the cooldowns of each the target skills by 2 turns. Now that's on a 4-turn cooldown when booked. This is very similar to Basher's skills. He's a free-to-play login champ for the Skinwalker faction. Is pretty necessary for the faction wars, in my opinion, because of that Leave Them Gutted skill right there. It doesn't exactly have the same name, but it works the same way. And Basher's is on a 3-turn cooldown, but he's an epic and a void, by the way. This one is a magic rare, so it makes sense that he's on a 4-turn cooldown when booked, but I find this guy to be pretty cool. I think that's a very cool skill. It's not one that's very, doesn't have a lot of representation in the game, and it's one that actually has a lot of value. There's a dragon in the Doom Tower that needs an ability like this to be able to counter it. So he seems like he'd be kind of cool. I don't know if I'm going to be building him up. He might be someone that, would make some sense for some reason. Now, there is some secret rooms inside the Doom Tower, especially on the hard side, that require you to have attack champs, and specifically rare ones. So this guy's another one of those guys. Maybe he's there for that secret room. Maybe he's someone you might want to level for that specific purpose. We'll have to check that one out in the future and go over that. Next, we have Spymaster, a rare force affinity HP Bannerlord. A1 is Spymaster's Blade. Attacks one enemy, has a 40% chance of decreasing the duration of 2 random buffs on the target by 1 turn. Directed Sabotage is the A2, attacks all enemies, has a 50% chance of placing a block buffs debuff for 2 turns. Now that's a very cool skill right there, and a highly sought after one as well. Cloak and Dagger on the A3, basic and an ascended. The basic places a counterattack buff in his champion for 2 turns. Ascended also has a 75% chance of placing a provoke debuff for 1 turn on 2 random enemies, with a 5-turn cooldown. So this guy, I don't know. If you need someone to do the block buffs debuff, could be kind of cool. Very essential right now in the Hydra rotation for rotation number 3. So we have, I think it's Poison Cloud is what it's called. We have Poison Cloud gets put on. We need to have the HP burn to basically be able to not weak hit, but we can block that with the block buffs debuff. Okay, Medicus. We have a rare spirit support high elf. A1 is Dual Scalpel, attacks one enemy 2 times. Restraints in A2, attacks all enemies, has a 50% chance of placing a 15% decreased speed debuff for 2 turns. Stimulate Elixir on A3 for the basic, places a 30% increased defense buff on all allies for 2 turns. The Ascended skill also places a 15% increased speed buff on this champion for 2 turns. Last one is Cagebound, a rare Void Affinity defense-based Lizardman. Very cool looking graphic. These guys always look really cool. They got the best art department probably in the world for video games at the moment. Twisted Spike A1, attacks one enemy, places a shield buff on this champion for 1 turn equal to 10% of their max HP. Swordbreak Cage on A2, attacks all enemies, has a 75% chance of placing a 25% decreased attack debuff for 2 turns. And Bound to Serve A3, basic and ascended. The basic places a 25% ally protection buff on all allies except this champion for 2 turns. Ascended skill also places a 15% continuous heal buff on this champion for 1 turn. Now we have Filja here. Filha, something like that. Filja, I'm just going to call her Filja. She's an epic magic attack dwarf. Now, she's the one you're going to have to make 4 copies of to create the fusion Karato Foxhunter. So, Elder's Judgment. And let's see if she's actually any good. Maybe you might want to keep a copy. Who knows? So, there actually is 1 copy available. I think you can do from, maybe it's a Summon Rush. There's definitely a way to get a 5th copy of her out of this events. So Elder's Judgment A1 attacks one enemy 2 times, decreases the target's max HP by 10% of the damage inflicted, cannot decrease a single enemy's max HP by more than 50%. Crushing Eternity A2 attacks one enemy, has a 75% chance of fully depleting the target's turn meter on a 4-turn cooldown. That's a 100% chance when booked up. Righteous Evocation A3 attacks all enemies, fills his champion's turn meter by 15%, and heals them by 15% of the damage inflicted if this attack is critical. I'm guessing when it says heals them, they mean heals Filja. So you get a crit, you get a little bit of heal, you get a little bit of turn meter. And then the passive Boon Chant, if this champion has 2 or fewer buffs at the start of the turn, places a 50% increased attack buff and a 30% increased crit damage buff on this champion for 1 turn. So, to be honest, I don't really see nothing all that special here. We'll have to check out those modifiers, multipliers, see if she's hitting pretty hard. I would imagine she probably will be, but nothing special that really stands out in my opinion, taking a first glance here. All right, let's see the brand new. I think we get the legendary now. Not mistaken. Yeah, we have Karato Foxhunter. So this is the fusion here, but then we have brand new characters as well on top of the fusion that are unrelated. And Yumeko here, who is related. We'll go over those in a second. All right, the fusion. Now, if you don't have the Shadowkins, this guy might be pretty badass. And if I'm not mistaken, I think his use, according to Plarium, Raid Shadow Legends themselves, is mainly a nuker for the arena. So he's a legendary spirit, attack-based Shadowkin. He has 3 visitations on the A1, attacks one enemy 3 times. Each hit is a 20% chance of placing a 25% weaken debuff for 2 turns. Now, as far as I can remember, if I recall correctly, I don't recall anyone that has an A3 or A1 attacks 3 times with the weaken debuff. So Yumeko is going to be a very cool companion when it comes to the A2, the A3, and the passive. Over Bedevil, the A2, attacks one enemy, places a stun debuff for 2 turns, grants an extra turn, and resets the cooldown of this skill if Yumeko is on the same team and the skill kills an enemy. 4-turn cooldown, 3-turn when booked. Then we have Suppression Ward on the A3, attacks all enemies, has an 80% chance, 100% chance when booked, of placing a block active skills debuff for 2 turns. This debuff cannot be resisted if Yumeko is on the same team, and that cannot go down on the cooldown. Then we have Stoicism. Passive. Damage inflicted by this champion cannot be decreased by enemy passive skills or masteries except by the passive skill of bosses. Damage inflicted by this champion cannot be increased either by this champion's masteries or ally passive skills. And when Yumeko dies, instantly grants a turn to this champion and resets the cooldowns of each of this champion's skills. So, kind of unique and pretty interesting skill there in the passive. So he's not being affected by any of the masteries or passive skills. So it makes me believe right off the bat that this dude's multipliers are going to be through the roof. So he doesn't need any kind of buffs whatsoever, and he's not affected by them either. So that's kind of cool. I actually like that. And then he has an aura, increases ally crit rate in all battles by 20%. Seems kind of cool, kind of cool. Now Yumeko, I have to see how the companion skills work out, but as a companion, seems like she sets him up to be pretty powerful. So moving on. You guys will have to decide whether you guys want to fuse them or not. I'm definitely fusing them, but I do not have a need for Shadowkins at the moment. I'm so over full with Shadowkin legendaries in that faction and leveling them up to 60 that I could really use some time with dwarves, orcs, and some other people, skinwalkers maybe, and level up some other people. But at the moment, I will definitely fuse them, but I probably won't max them out right away. So moving on to the new characters that aren't part of the fusion, we have Andrissia, Epic Void Defense High Elf. Censorious Bludgeon A1 attacks one enemy, has a 40% chance of placing a 30% decrease crit damage debuff for 2 turns. Very interesting on that one because you have a 15% chance to crit on basic content. So you imagine the only people that really need their crit damage removed down would be people that are landing crits 100% of the time, like people in the arena. So weird A1 for sure. Mind Prison A2 attacks one enemy, has a 75% chance of placing a stun debuff for 1 turn if the target does not have any active buffs, has a 75% chance of placing a stun debuff for 2 turns if the target does have any active buffs, 100% chance when booked, and a 3-turn cooldown when booked up. Interesting. So you get a 2-turn stun if they have buffs. So this kind of like screams arena to me for sure. Pointed Justice on the A3 attacks all enemies, has a 75% chance of decreasing the duration of all enemy buffs by 2 turns, increases the duration of all increased defense buffs on allies by 1 turn. Interesting. I'd prefer to have increase in all the buffs, which would be cool. Like Flesh Terror, for example, or Krisk. The 2 turns on the enemy buffs, though, is kind of cool. Again, really screams arena to me. And then she has a passive called Heartstrong. At the start of each turn, places a 50% ally protection buff for 2 turns on the ally with the lowest max HP. Will not be placed in this champion. Also places a 25% strengthen buff and a 60% increased defense buff in this champion for 2 turns on a 5-turn cooldown, and it can't be booked down lower. So this really screams like Necrit to me. It's really seems like an arena-based champ, like a budget Necrit, but man, this passive could be really cool if it didn't have this big-ass cooldown on it. So the cooldown like really makes it interesting because it kind of makes it seem like it's kind of a token ability. Like we'll see it one time and then the arena fight's going to be over before we see it a second time. Whereas Necrit can cast it and it has a cooldown on it. So it is able to be replaced on multiple characters throughout the fight. But I don't see that happening with this character here. So kind of like a busted budget Necrit. But definitely an arena champ for sure. Got a 2-turn stun, decrease crit damage, decrease enemy buffs, increased duration of increased defense. So she puts increased defense on herself and then can increase the duration of it. Weird kit for sure. Interesting though. All right, moving on to Thoresque, Epic Force Attack Dark Elf. So again, these attack-based champs, force-based champs as well. They got secret rooms for these guys. I'll have to double check which room I'm talking about to see if it'll fit with her, but I think there's one that would. Dual Debility on the A1 attacks one enemy 2 times. Each hit has a 25% chance of increasing the duration of 1 random debuff by 1 turn. So a little bit like kind of like Vogoth a little bit. A2 is Dressed Down, attacks one enemy 3 times. Each hit is a 40% chance of removing 1 random buff from the target, which goes up to, I guess, a 60% chance when booked. That's kind of interesting. And then Hates Flowers, A3, attacks all enemies, has a 50% chance of placing a 50% decrease resistance debuff for 2 turns on a 4-turn cooldown when booked. So this is an interesting skill because this is the first time we've seen decrease resistance or increase resistance on a kit in a game. So I'm going to have to like really think about this one for a second here. Ruthless passive inflicts 10% more damage against targets whose resistance is lower than this champion's accuracy. So it's really weird because how the hell do you land a decreased resistance debuff on somebody who has such high resistance that you can't even, like out accuracy them? I would kind of feel like I wish there was some kind of way to maybe not be able to resist that, or have it like not based off accuracy, or maybe have like your accuracy be increased based off your resistance. I don't know. Something here, like something interesting to make that so you can land it pretty easily, because what's the point of adding it if you can't use it? So if it is useful, wow, it could be a game changer. So Thoresque could be a game changer. I guess this one definitely requires some testing. So moving on, her aura increases ally crit rate in all battles by 12%. Let's move on to the next one. We got Sir Artemage, Epic Force Attack Bannerlord. Nobleman's Mace attacks one enemy 2 times. The first hit has a 40% chance of placing a 60% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns. Second hit is a 40% chance of placing a 30% decreased speed debuff for 2 turns. Then Ring True A2 removes all debuffs from this champion and attacks all enemies. Unshakable Valor A3 attacks one enemy, will ignore 30% of the target's defense. Places a 50% increase attack buff and a 30% increase crit damage buff on this champion for 2 turns if this attack kills an enemy. These buffs cannot be removed. Then we have an Aura, increases ally speed in arena battles by 20%, not the usual 19. So 1% more on Sir Artemage here. Really not that impressed by this kit here. Decreased speed, decreased defense on the A1 is kind of cool. I have to admit that. But besides that, I mean, the rest of it doesn't seem to stand out that much. Okay, so we have Legendaries now. Let's go over first the companion legendary, which we already can guess is going to be a void. Because usually there's one void and one non-void when it comes to these companions. So Yumeko is a legendary void support Shadowkin. Now, I'm not going to read the kit yet before I say that I wish she's a healer. Like, I really hope that there's some kind of healing going on in the Shadowkin faction, a Resurrector, something of that nature. Even something with Hex could be cool. So, Wear Claws here. Attacks one enemy 2 times. Each hit steals 7.5% of the target's turn meter if this champion has 50% HP or more. Each hit heals this champion by 30% of the damage inflicted if this champion has less than 50% HP. Okay, Destiny's Mirror attacks one enemy, has an 80% chance of placing a Hex debuff for 3 turns. There's a 100% chance when booked. Passive effect. Whenever an enemy tries to place debuffs on either this champion or an ally, has a 55% chance of transferring those debuffs to a random enemy under a Hex debuff placed by this champion. This happens before any debuffs are placed on the initial target. Has a 30% chance instead against bosses. Whenever someone fills the turn meter of an enemy under a Hex debuff placed by this champion's turn meter will be filled instead. Only available when Karato Foxhunter is on the same team. So I really like that part at the bottom there. Moving on to her A3, Dance of Time. Decreases the cooldown of all ally skills by 3 turns. What the heck? And increases the cooldowns of all enemy skills by 3 turns. What the heck is this? Will not decrease the cooldowns of this champion's skills on a 7-turn cooldown, 5-turn cooldown when booked. Very much like Countess Licks. Wow, that's an amazing ability right there. Decreases the cooldowns of all ally skills by 3 turns. And I mean, I'm guessing that works on Countess Licks as well. So you can kind of like have them work on each other. That's nuts. That's crazy right there. Wow. All right, Deep Cover passive places a Perfect Veil buff in this champion for 2 turns at the start of each round. This champion is immune to all debuffs if they are under a Veil or Perfect Veil buff. Whenever a Veil or a Perfect Veil buff is placed on an enemy, has a 75% chance of stealing the buff. It happens before the buff is placed on the initial target. Only available when Karato Foxhunter is on the same team. Dang, that's crazy right there. I like that one. Like kind of like a little counter to Candrafon and some other people like that. The aura increases ally accuracy in all battles by 60. She's nuts. Wow. Yamiko is a very nice addition to the game. I like her. So she's not healing anybody like I kind of wanted to begin with, but wow, she is absolutely crazy. So she's reminding me a little bit of Sify, man. Got some utility to her. That's crazy. Wow. Wow. All right, so moving on to the next legendary, we got Beauregard the Elder, a legendary force affinity HP-based dwarf, antique staff, attacks one enemy, has a 50% chance of placing a 60% increased defense buff on 1 turn on an ally with the lowest HP. Will not be placed on this champion, has a 100% chance instead of this attack is critical. That's pretty cool. We've seen some other stuff like this in the game. We got like Rain Beast, for example. It's got the continuous heals. Got shields from Demitha, stuff like that. I like these types of A1s. More defensive based. A2 Souls of Old Stone removes 1 random debuff from all allies, then places a shield buff on all allies for 2 turns equal to 20% of this champion's max HP on a 3-turn cooldown when booked up. Like shields. Always work out pretty nicely. Rune of Energy A3 places a 50% increased resistance buff. Wow, that's new. And a 30% increased speed buff on all allies for 2 turns. A 4-turn cooldown when booked up, 6 turn to start with. So we have our very first increased resistance buff. Then we have the decreased resistance debuff from the other character earlier. So we have the increase and the decrease. Very cool. I like seeing these additions to the game. Then we got Beauregard's Blazon passive. Allies receive 10% less damage from champions whose resistance is lower than or equal to theirs. Interesting. So attack-based characters are going to have low resistance already. So they're going to be doing 10% less damage to this dude. Guess it applies to him as well as all the allies, right? Or is it only the allies? All these wording in these things are so off, man. So at least it's at least it's the allies for sure. 10% less damage. So another arena-based champ, I think. Increased defense, got shield, increased resistance, increased speed, and decreased damage. Got some damage mitigation here. The aura is increases ally resist in all battles by 50. Guy's pretty badass. I like him. Not sure exactly where I'll be using him, but he looks like an arena defensive base champ to me. Maybe 3 versus 3 teams. Go and see the last legendary here. We have Archbishop Pintroy, legendary spirit support of the Sacred Order. Okay, A1 is Author of Fates, attacks one enemy, transfers 1 random debuff from this champion to the target, also has a 75% chance of stealing 1 random buff from the target. We have Holy Word, A2, places a 50% increase accuracy buff on all allies for 2 turns, then attacks all enemies. Places a 100% heal reduction debuff on all enemies for 2 turns, also has a 75% chance of placing a block buffs debuff on all enemies for 2 turns. Champions from the Demon Spawn, Undead Horde, and Knights Revenant factions cannot resist these debuffs. That is a strange one right there. I'm going to have to definitely go over that one again in a second. Gleam of Glory, A3, heals all allies by 30% of their max HP, then places a 60% increased defense buff on all allies for 2 turns. If 4 or more allies are alive, also places a shield buff on each ally for 2 turns equal to 30% of their max HP. Dang, that's a big one. Splendor passive removes all decreased defense debuffs and weakened debuffs from this champion at the start of each turn. So he cannot be weakened or decreased defense. He will not take your extra damage. He said, fuck that shit. Alright, Aura increases ally accuracy in all battles by 50. Go over this kit again real quick. So he'll give you increased accuracy, then attack all enemies. Also places a heal reduction, and also can place a block buffs debuff. That's powerful. That's pretty powerful. But he's going to make sure you do not heal up. He's going to land those too. Got a heal and a shield. This guy, he's a badass. Ain't taking your shit. All right, so that's the last of them. We have some pretty good characters, I think, this time. Yumeko is a major badass. Nice addition to the game. Got Beauregard the Elder. Seems like he could be decent. We'll have to try him out. Then we got Pintroy over here. The block buffs debuff is the big one, I think. Especially for Hydra Boss. So if you're looking for something like this guy might have that. He's got on a 3-turn cooldown when booked. Not be resisted by these factions. I do like this addition to the game as well, as long as it's something extra. So I would say that these epics are a little bit of a letdown. They leave a lot to be desired. Thoresque could be decent with his decreased resistance debuff, but even then it's only a 75% chance on a 4-turn cooldown. So if you don't land that, man, you ain't going to get another chance to land it. You know what I'm saying? It's a 1 try only, and you're done deal in the arena. So I don't know about that one. This one seemed like it could have been cool, like a baby Necrit over here, but this passive with that 5-turn cooldown, just, I don't know. Maybe they'll buff this character in the future and lower that, do something. She seems like she could be cool, but she's not going to be all that amazing. We got Corrado here. Most definitely worth fusing, I think, especially if you're lacking Shadowkins for the Shadowkin Crypt. And we got Filja. You're going to get 5 copies of Filja. Honestly, not that overwhelmed by her. Maybe someone for the Faction Wars. All the rares, I would say that, maybe this guy Trugor's got some use. But that's it for today's video. I'll definitely come back and do the patch 5.20 notes in a minute and launch that video as well. So we have 2 videos coming back to back. And then we should have some more videos coming soon. You guys stay tuned for those. Hope you guys are having a great day. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.